It started with the tea. Every Sunday dinner at my in-laws' house, Harold, my father-in-law, would insist on making me his special blend. No one else ever drank it, not even my husband David. "It's just for my dear daughter-in-law," Harold would say with that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and 6 months ago, I made the mistake of discovering that my father-in-law had been embezzling from his former pharmacy chain. I never told anyone, but somehow he knew I'd accessed those old records. The symptoms began gradually. First, it was just stomach cramps and dizziness after those Sunday dinners. Then came the unexplained bruising, hair loss, and finally, the vomiting blood. "You're working too hard," David would say, watching me curl up in pain on our bathroom floor. "Maybe you should take a break from that accounting job." But I knew better. I'd seen the way Harold watched me during those family dinners, how his eyes followed the teacup as I drank, how he'd ask, with carefully crafted concern, if I was feeling well. Last Sunday, I caught him in the kitchen, adding something to my tea, a fine white powder that disappeared instantly in the dark liquid. When I confronted David about it, he exploded. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, pacing our bedroom. "Dad's been a respected pharmacist for 40 years. He's retired now, for God's sake. Why would he want to hurt you?" I couldn't tell him about the financial records I discovered. The millions missing, the falsified prescriptions, the money trail that led to offshore accounts. Harold had built his reputation on being the kindly neighborhood pharmacist while systematically stealing from his own company. The statute of limitations hadn't expired yet, and he knew I had enough evidence to ruin him. "I'm not imagining this," I insisted, showing David the latest bruises blooming across my arms. "These aren't normal. Something's wrong." "You've always been jealous of my relationship with Dad," David snapped. "Ever since we got married, you've tried to come between us. Now you're making up these crazy accusations." I stared at my husband of 3 years, wondering how I'd never noticed this blind spot before. David had always idolized his father, but this was different. This was willful ignorance. The next day, while David was at work, I drove myself to the hospital. Dr. Jessica Wong had been my friend since college, and she listened without judgment as I explained my suspicions. "We'll run a full toxicology panel," she said, drawing vials of blood. "But Sarah, if what you're saying is true, this is attempted murder." "I know," I whispered, watching my blood fill the tubes. "But I need proof. No one will believe me without it." Jessica squeezed my hand. "I believe you. And these symptoms, they're consistent with heavy metal poisoning. Someone with pharmaceutical knowledge would know exactly how to administer it gradually." While we waited for the results, my condition worsened. Harold had somehow noticed my hospital visit, probably through his old medical contacts, and the next Sunday dinner he doubled his efforts. "You're looking pale, dear," he said, placing the teacup in front of me. "This special blend will help. It's got extra nutrients." I pretended to drink while watching him. His hands were steady, his smile confident. This was a man used to playing the caring father figure while calculating doses that would kill slowly enough to appear natural. David remained oblivious, chatting about work while I discreetly emptied my cup into a potted plant. That night, the plant's leaves turned black. When I showed David the dead plant the next morning, he accused me of poisoning it myself to prove a point. "You need help," he said, reaching for his phone. "I'm calling Dr. Stevens, that therapist Dad recommended." "No," I said firmly, grabbing my purse. "What I need is a husband who trusts me more than he trusts a murderer." "Dad is not a murderer," David roared, his face turning red. Get out until you come to your senses." I was already heading for the door when my phone buzzed. It was Jessica. "Sarah," her voice was urgent. "The results are in. Get somewhere safe. I'm calling the police." As I drove away from my house, I saw Harold's car pulling into our driveway. He'd probably come to deliver another dose, to finish what he'd started. But he didn't know about the lab results yet. Didn't know that his carefully constructed veneer of respectability was about to shatter. I pulled into Jessica's driveway just as my phone exploded with messages from David. The lab had called him too, as my emergency contact. Now he knew. Now everyone would know. The toxicology report was devastating in its detail. Thallium, arsenic, and lead, all in levels that should have killed me weeks ago. Jessica explained that my symptoms had been masked by carefully calculated doses, administered gradually to mimic a natural illness. "This isn't just attempted murder," Detective Morris said, reviewing the report in Jessica's living room. This is the work of someone with extensive pharmaceutical knowledge. He knew exactly how to keep you alive while slowly destroying your organs. My phone kept buzzing. David's messages evolved from anger to disbelief to desperate pleas. Please come home, we need to talk. This can't be real. There must be a mistake. Dad's crying. He says he loves you like a daughter. I turned off my phone. The police raid on Harold's house revealed his detailed poisoning journal hidden behind a false panel in his study. Pages of calculations, observations of my symptoms, and timeline projections for what he called my natural decline. He planned to kill me slowly over 6 months, making it look like a mysterious illness. They found the poison stash in his garage, carefully labeled and dated. Multiple substances, each chosen for its specific effects. The detective said it was one of the most methodical attempted murders she'd ever seen. Your father-in-law wasn't just trying to kill you, Detective Morris explained. He was conducting a clinical trial of sorts. Testing different combinations, documenting your reactions. He was treating you like a laboratory experiment. David arrived at the police station while they were booking Harold. I watched through a one-way mirror as my husband confronted his father. Tell me it's not true, David begged. Tell me they're wrong. Harold's kindly mask finally cracked. She was going to ruin everything, he snarled. Poking around in old records, thinking she could destroy my legacy. I built that pharmacy chain from nothing. The money I took was mine by right. David staggered backward. Money? You tried to kill my wife over money? She needed to be eliminated, Harold said coldly. I couldn't let some accountant destroy 40 years of careful work. You would have moved on, found someone else. Someone who knows how to mind their own business. I stepped into the room then, facing my would-be murderer. Harold's eyes widened at my appearance, perhaps shocked I was still alive. The records are already with the FBI, I said quietly. All of them. The embezzlement, the fake prescriptions, the overseas accounts. I sent them the day I found them. I just never told you. Harold lunged across the table, but the officers restrained him. His facade of respectability completely shattered as he screamed threats and obscenities. David watched in horror as his father was dragged away, raving about how he should have used stronger doses. In the hallway afterward, David couldn't meet my eyes. I should have believed you, he whispered. All those times you said something was wrong, I chose him over you. You chose the father you thought you had, I replied, not the man he really is. The following weeks were a blur of medical treatments, police interviews, and legal proceedings. The evidence against Harold was overwhelming. Not only for my attempted murder, but for decades of financial crimes. The FBI found over $12 million hidden in various accounts. More victims came forward. Other people who had mysteriously died after threatening to expose Harold's schemes over the years. The detective suspected he'd been silencing threats this way for decades, using his pharmaceutical knowledge to commit nearly perfect murders. David filed for divorce, unable to live with his guilt and shame. I didn't fight it. Some betrayals can't be undone, some trust can't be rebuilt. He sent me a letter from his therapy sessions, trying to explain how he'd been manipulated by his father's lifetime of lies. I was raised to believe he was perfect, David wrote. Every time someone accused him of wrongdoing, he'd paint them as jealous, mentally unstable, or vindictive. I never realized I was part of his manipulation until I saw him try to kill you. Jessica helped me through the recovery process, both physical and emotional. The poison had done some permanent damage to my liver, but with treatment, I would survive. You know what amazes me? She said during one of our sessions. You never doubted yourself. Even when everyone else called you paranoid, you trusted your instincts. Harold's trial revealed the full scope of his crimes. 5 suspicious deaths were linked to him, all people who had discovered his financial schemes. He'd used his reputation as a caring pharmacist to cover his tracks, knowing that no one would suspect the kindly old man who gave free medical advice to his neighbors. The judge sentenced him to life without parole. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time. The mask was completely gone now, revealing the calculating killer beneath. I held his gaze, refusing to show fear. You should have checked those records more carefully, I told him. I'm an accountant. We always keep receipts. 1 year later, I sat in a conference room at the FBI headquarters, sharing my story with a room full of forensic accountants. My experience had become a case study in financial fraud detection and how white-collar crimes can escalate to violence. The numbers always tell a story, I explained, showing them the transaction patterns I'd discovered. Harold's mistake was thinking that killing me would bury his secrets. But evidence doesn't die with its witnesses. The investigation into Harold's past had uncovered a trail of victims spanning 3 decades. Whistleblowers, employees, and even a journalist, all had died from seemingly natural causes after getting too close to his schemes. The FBI dubbed him the pharmacist poisoner, and his case became one of the most significant white-collar crime investigations in state history. My liver function had improved to 80%, better than doctors expected. The permanent damage meant I couldn't drink alcohol anymore, but it seemed a small price to pay for surviving. Jessica had become my closest friend, and she'd helped me start a support group for survivors of financial fraud and domestic abuse. The hardest part for victims, I told my support group, is that these criminals often wear respectable faces. They're trusted community members, beloved family figures. That's what makes them so dangerous. David attempted reconciliation 6 months after the trial. He'd been through intensive therapy, trying to understand how he'd been manipulated throughout his life. "I've realized Dad controlled everything," he said during our coffee meeting. "My career choice, my friendships, even my marriage to you. He wanted someone in the family business to help cover his tracks. And when I threatened that plan, he tried to eliminate me." I finished. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." David's voice cracked. "I should have protected you." I looked at my ex-husband, seeing him clearly for the first time. He was another of Harold's victims, manipulated since childhood to enable his father's crimes. But understanding didn't mean forgiveness was possible. "We can't go back," I said gently. "Too much has happened." He nodded, accepting this final goodbye. The pharmaceutical chain Harold had stolen from offered me a position as head of their forensic accounting department. "We need someone who knows what to look for," the CEO said. "Someone who won't back down under pressure." I accepted, implementing new security measures and training programs. My experience had taught me that the most dangerous predators often hide behind respectability and family ties. Harold's case sparked investigations into other long-term healthcare fraud schemes. My testimony before the state medical board led to stricter monitoring of pharmaceutical inventories and prescription patterns. "You've turned your nightmare into positive change," Jessica said during one of our regular dinners. "That's the best revenge." She was right. Every time I helped expose another fraud, every time I protected potential victims, I was defeating Harold's legacy of manipulation and murder. The nightmares about poisoned tea gradually faded. I still couldn't attend family dinners or accept drinks from others, but my therapist said that was a reasonable adaptation, not paranoia. Last week, I received a letter from Harold's prison. I recognized his handwriting on the envelope but didn't open it. Some voices don't deserve to be heard anymore. Instead, I focused on building my new life. I started dating again, carefully this time, paying attention to how potential partners treated service staff and handled disagreements. I'd learned to spot the warning signs of manipulation and control. My story appeared in several true crime documentaries, always focusing on the financial investigation aspect rather than sensationalizing the violence. I wanted other accountants and auditors to understand that their work could literally save lives. "The numbers don't lie" became my mantra in training sessions. Trust your instincts when the evidence points to wrongdoing, no matter how respected the suspect might be. Today, I'm heading to another FBI training session. My poisoning case has become required reading for forensic accountants and fraud investigators. Harold tried to silence me, but instead he made my voice louder than ever. The potted plant from that last Sunday dinner sits on my office desk, its dead leaves preserved in a glass case. It serves as a reminder that survival sometimes means trusting yourself when everyone else calls you crazy. That justice can come through spreadsheets as surely as through courtrooms. And every time I help another whistleblower stand their ground, every time I protect another potential victim, I think of that teacup and the poison it held. Harold tried to write my ending, but instead he only wrote his own. Some poisons are meant to kill you. Others, if you survive them, make you strong enough to save others. I chose the latter.